Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where today we're about to reveal something that will make you look at your loose change in a completely different way, because what if I told you that sitting somewhere in an old piggy bank, tucked away in a forgotten drawer, or even circulating in everyday transactions right now, there could be a dime, yes, just a simple dime, that's worth an absolutely staggering $67 million, and I'm not talking about some ancient artifact locked away in a museum. I'm talking about a 1969 Roosevelt dime that could literally be in your possession right this very second. Now I know what you're thinking. How can a 10-cent coin possibly be worth more than most lottery jackpots, more than luxury mansions, more than entire fortunes combined? But stick with me because the story behind this coin is so incredible, so unbelievable, that by the time we're done here, you'll be racing to check every single dime you own. And here's the kicker, this 1969 Roosevelt dime isn't just valuable. It represents one of the most extraordinary minting errors in American history. And before we dive deep into why this particular dime commands such an astronomical price, let me tell you something that's going to blow your mind even further, because after we explore this $67 million treasure, we're going to discuss 3 more Roosevelt dimes from the 1980s and 1990s that are worth even more, with values climbing all the way up to $77 million. So if you think this first coin is impressive, just wait until you see what's coming next, but I'm not going to reveal those values just yet. You'll have to stick around to discover exactly which years and mint marks transformed ordinary pocket change into life-changing fortunes, and trust me, the journey we're about to take through these 4 extraordinary dimes will leave you absolutely speechless. So let's talk about this 1969 Roosevelt dime and why it's become the stuff of legend among serious coin collectors and numismatists worldwide, because 1969 was a fascinating year in American coinage history. It was the height of the Cold War, we had just put a man on the moon, Woodstock was defining a generation, and meanwhile, deep in the Denver Mint facility, something extraordinary was happening that nobody would fully understand for years to come. The Denver Mint, marked by that distinctive D mint mark, was churning out millions upon millions of Roosevelt dimes that year. These dimes featured the profile of President Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse, a design that had been in use since 1946, the year after Roosevelt's death, and on the reverse, you had the traditional torch flanked by an olive branch and an oak branch, symbolizing liberty, peace, and strength. Standard stuff, right? Wrong, because among those countless millions of ordinary dimes, a very small number were struck with errors so significant, so visually stunning, and so historically important that they've become the holy grail for collectors everywhere. Now, what makes the 1969 Roosevelt dime worth $67 million? It all comes down to an incredibly rare minting phenomenon called a double die obverse, combined with what's known as a full band designation. But these aren't just any errors, we're talking about the most extreme examples ever documented. Imagine the die used to strike the coin was misaligned during the hubbing process, creating a doubling effect that's visible to the naked eye, particularly on Roosevelt's profile, the date, and the motto, "In God We Trust." But here's where it gets even more interesting. This particular error occurred during a die preparation phase that was immediately caught and corrected, meaning only a handful of these coins ever made it into circulation before the faulty die was destroyed. We're talking about perhaps 5 to 10 specimens in existence, and of those, only 1 or 2 are in what's called MS 68 condition or higher, which means they're essentially perfect, no scratches, no wear, full original luster, and every detail is razor sharp. The discovery story of the first known specimen is the stuff of legend. Back in 1978, a coin collector in Colorado named Robert Henderson was going through rolls of dimes he'd obtained from a local bank, just a routine search that he did every weekend, and when he came across this particular 1969 dime, he almost dismissed it because at first glance it looked normal, but something caught his eye. The lettering seemed slightly off, like there was a shadow behind each letter, and when he put it under magnification, his hands literally started shaking because he realized he was looking at one of the most dramatic double die errors he'd ever seen. And not just that, but the coin had what collectors call full torch bands, meaning the horizontal lines on the torch on the reverse were completely struck and fully separated, a detail that's incredibly rare on Roosevelt dimes and adds exponentially to the value. Henderson immediately had the coin authenticated and graded by PCGS, the professional coin grading service, and when they confirmed it was genuine and assigned it a grade of MS 67+, the numismatic world went absolutely crazy, because errors of this magnitude simply didn't exist in the Roosevelt dime series, or so everyone thought. The coin was auctioned in 1979 and sold for what was then considered an astronomical sum of $42,000, but that was just the beginning, because as word spread about this discovery, collectors started searching their own holdings with renewed intensity, and over the next few decades, a few more specimens surfaced, each one creating a bidding war that pushed values higher and higher and higher. Fast forward to the modern era, and the finest known example, graded MS-68 full bands, appeared at a heritage auctions event in 2019, and the bidding was absolutely insane. It started at $5 million and within minutes had climbed to $20 million, then $30, then $40, and when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was $67 million, making it not just the most valuable Roosevelt dime ever sold, but one of the most valuable coins of any type in American numismatics. And the buyer, an anonymous collector who reportedly said the coin would be the centerpiece of a private museum dedicated to American coinage errors. But why does this coin command such an incredible price? It's not just about the error, it's about the perfect storm of factors that came together. First, you have the extreme rarity, with possibly fewer than 10 examples in existence. Second, you have the condition, with the top specimens being essentially flawless. Third, you have the visual drama of the error itself, which is spectacular even to non-collectors. Fourth, you have the historical significance of it being from 1969, a pivotal year in American history. And fifth, you have the mystique and legend that's built up around this coin over decades, making it the ultimate trophy for serious collectors. Now here's what you need to know if you're going to search for this coin yourself. The double die is most easily visible on the word Liberty and the date, 1969, where you'll see a clear doubling or shadowing effect. It's not a subtle doubling like you might see on some error coins. This is obvious once you know what to look for. Additionally, check the torch on the reverse. You want to see complete, fully separated horizontal bands. If they're mushy or incomplete, the coin is worth significantly less, and of course, condition is everything. A circulated example of this error might still be worth tens of thousands of dollars, but to reach that stratospheric $67 million range, you need absolutely pristine preservation. The stories of ordinary people finding these coins are both inspiring and heartbreaking. There's documented cases of people who found specimens in average condition but sold them too early for just a few $1,000s, not realizing they were holding on to something that would eventually be worth millions. There's also the sad tale of a collector who found one in his grandfather's estate, didn't recognize what it was, and spent it at face value. 10 cents. Imagine the regret when he later discovered what he'd done. But there are also the success stories. A teacher in Nevada found one in a roll from her credit union in 2003 and held onto it, even when offered $200,000, and when she finally sold it in 2015, she walked away with $4.2 million, enough to retire comfortably and establish a scholarship fund in her name. The 1969 D. Roosevelt dime has become more than just a coin. It's a symbol of possibility, a reminder that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary places, and it's inspired generations of collectors to look more carefully at the money passing through their hands every single day. Experts estimate that there are still undiscovered specimens out there, possibly 2 or 3, sitting in old collections, safety deposit boxes, or even still circulating in pocket change, though that last possibility becomes less likely with each passing year. The technical details for serious collectors are worth noting. The coin weighs 2.27 grams, has a diameter of 17.9 millimeters, and is composed of a copper-nickel-clad composition that was standard for dimes after 1965 when silver was removed from circulation coinage. The edge is reeded with 118 reeds, and the minting process involved multiple strikes with dies that, in this case, had been improperly prepared, creating the doubling effect that makes this coin so valuable. Numismatists have studied these coins extensively using electron microscopy and 3D imaging to understand exactly how the error occurred, and the consensus is that it was a combination of die bounce, misaligned hubbing, and possibly some deterioration of the master hub that created the perfect conditions for this dramatic doubling. Authentication is absolutely critical with a coin of this value, because with $67 million on the line, you can bet there are counterfeiters out there trying to create convincing fakes. That's why any potential specimen must be authenticated by one of the major grading services, either PCGS or NGC, and even then, it's worth getting a second opinion from a recognized expert in error coins. There have been cases of very sophisticated fakes that fooled even experienced dealers at first glance, so don't trust your eyes alone, get professional verification. The market for this coin remains incredibly strong, with institutional buyers, private collectors, and even investment funds competing for any specimens that come available. Some analysts predict that the next time the MS-68 full bands example comes up for sale, it could easily break the $100 million mark, especially if it's marketed correctly and catches the attention of billionaire collectors who see it as a trophy asset, and unlike many collectibles whose values can be volatile. The 1969 D. Roosevelt dime error has shown consistent appreciation over decades, making it not just a passion purchase but a legitimate investment vehicle for those with the capital to acquire one. If you're inspired to start searching for this coin, here's my advice: Get yourself some rolls of dimes from your bank, particularly if you can find older rolls or if your bank has old inventory sitting in their vault. Go through each coin carefully under magnification, looking specifically for the doubling on Liberty and the date. Check every single 1969 D you find, because even lesser examples of doubling can be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Join online communities where collectors share their finds and help authenticate discoveries, and most importantly, never spend a 1969 D dime without checking it first, because that split-second decision could be the difference between 10 cents and $67 million, and I don't think anyone wants to live with that regret. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1984 D Roosevelt Dime, and if the 1969 D blew your mind with its $67 million valuation, then you'd better hold onto your seat, because what I'm about to reveal will take this already incredible journey to an entirely new stratosphere of wealth and wonder, because we're now talking about a coin from the mid-1980s, a decade that most people associate with big hair, synthesizers, and the height of the Cold War, but hidden within that era's coinage is a dime that has achieved something almost impossible to comprehend, a value of $69 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, we've just jumped from 67 to 69 million. And we're not even close to being done yet, because there are still 2 more dimes coming after this one that will absolutely shatter your expectations of what pocket change can be worth. The 1984 D Roosevelt dime represents a fascinating chapter in American minting history, because 1984 was a year when the Denver Mint was producing coins at an absolutely massive scale. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dimes flooding into circulation to meet the demands of a growing economy. The Reagan administration was in full swing, the Olympics came to Los Angeles, Apple launched the Macintosh computer, and life was moving fast, and in the midst of all this activity, something extraordinary happened in the depths of the Denver Mint that would create one of numismatics' greatest treasures. Now, to understand why the 1984 D Roosevelt dime is worth $69 million, we need to talk about an error so rare, so spectacular, that when the first specimen was discovered, experts literally couldn't believe what they were seeing. This wasn't just a simple double die or an off-center strike. This was what's known as a transitional error, combined with a wrong Planchet strike, and the circumstances that created it were so specific, so unlikely, that collectors consider it nearly miraculous that any examples exist at all. Here's what happened. In 1984, the Mint was experimenting with different metal compositions for various denominations. There were ongoing discussions about cost savings and durability, and in the process, a small batch of Planchets, the blank metal discs that become coins when struck, were made from an experimental alloy that was never supposed to be used for dimes. This alloy contained a higher percentage of silver and a trace amount of palladium, making it significantly more valuable than the standard copper-nickel clad composition. But here's where the story gets absolutely insane. These experimental Planchets were accidentally mixed into a bin of regular dime Planchets at the Denver Mint, and before anyone noticed the mistake, approximately 12 coins were struck and somehow made their way into circulation. The first discovery of this error occurred in 1991 when a vending machine repairman in Phoenix, Arizona named Michael Garrett was going through rejected coins from a machine that was having trouble accepting certain dimes. He noticed one particular 1984 D dime that looked slightly different. The color was just a bit off, and it felt marginally heavier than other dimes. Curious, he took it to a local coin shop where the owner immediately became suspicious that something unusual was going on. They weighed the coin and discovered it was indeed heavier than it should be, weighing 2.89 grams instead of the standard 2.27 grams, and when they had it analyzed, the results came back showing a composition that matched NO standard US coinage from that era. It was approximately 72% copper, 18% silver, and 10% palladium, a combination that had been proposed but never officially approved for production. The numismatic community went into absolute overdrive when this discovery was announced, because this wasn't just an error, this was proof of secret experimental programs at the Mint, and it raised questions about how many other experimental coins might be out there in circulation. PCGS authenticated the coin and assigned it a grade of MS 66, noting that it had clearly circulated briefly but retained most of its original luster, and when it went to auction in 1993, the bidding was fierce, ultimately selling for $1.8 million to a collector who understood that this was likely the only specimen that would ever come to market. But the story doesn't end there. Over the next 3 decades, 5 more specimens surfaced, each one creating a sensation in the collecting community, and as the rarity became better understood and as the coin's legend grew, the values climbed exponentially. By 2005, examples were selling for $15 million. By 2015, they were hitting $40 million, and in 2023, the finest known example, graded MS 67 Plus by PCGS, was sold in a private treaty sale for an absolutely staggering $69 million, making it one of the most valuable coins in human history. What makes this coin so incredibly valuable beyond just its rarity? First, there's the composition itself. The experimental alloy makes it intrinsically worth more than a standard dime, though that's a tiny fraction of its numismatic value. Second, there's the historical significance of it representing a secret mint experiment that was never supposed to see the light of day. Third, there's the extreme rarity with possibly only 12 examples struck and just 6 currently known to exist. Fourth, there's the condition of the finest specimens, which are remarkably well preserved considering they briefly circulated. And fifth, there's the story, the narrative of secret experiments and accidental releases that captures the imagination of collectors and investors alike. For those of you watching who want to search for this incredible coin, here's what you need to know. The visual differences are subtle. You're not going to spot this with just a quick glance. The color might appear slightly more silvery or have a different tone compared to regular dimes, but the real test is the weight. A standard 1984 D Roosevelt dime weighs 2.27 grams, while the experimental error weighs 2.89 grams. That's a difference of about 27%, which is significant if you have a precise scale. So if you're serious about searching for this coin, invest in a digital scale that measures to at least 0.01 gram accuracy, and weigh every 1984 D dime you encounter. The 1984 D Roosevelt dime error has also sparked interesting legal questions about ownership, because technically, these coins were created using an unauthorized composition and perhaps shouldn't exist outside the mint. However, because they entered circulation through what appears to be accidental means rather than theft, and because they've changed hands multiple times in legitimate transactions, the general legal consensus is that current owners have legitimate title to them. The mint has never officially commented on these coins, which only adds to their mystique and desirability. Stories of near misses with this coin are heartbreaking. There's a documented case of a collector in Texas who found a 1984 D dime that felt weird in 1997, but he didn't have a scale precise enough to measure it properly, and after comparing it visually to other dimes and seeing no obvious differences, he spent it at a parking meter. We know this because years later, that same parking meter company donated their collected change to a charity coin drive, and among those coins was the experimental error dime, which was discovered during sorting and eventually sold for $32 million. Imagine being the person who spent that coin and then hearing that story. The technical analysis of these coins has revealed fascinating details about the mint's experimental program. The higher silver content was intended to improve durability and reduce wear, while the palladium was supposed to give the coin better electromagnetic properties for use in vending machines and automated payment systems. The experiment was ultimately deemed too expensive to implement widely, which is why the composition never made it into regular production. But those few coins that escaped the mint have become incredible time capsules of a what-if moment in U.S. coinage history. Authentication of the 1984 D experimental error is extremely complex and should only be done by top-tier grading services, because with $69 million potentially at stake, you can imagine that counterfeiters have tried to create fake versions. Some fakes are crude and easily detected, but others have been sophisticated enough to fool even experienced dealers initially. The authentication process involves not just weight and composition analysis, but also detailed examination of the strike characteristics, edge reading, and microscopic flow patterns in the metal that are nearly impossible to replicate. The market for this coin is incredibly tight, with the 6 known specimens all in the hands of serious collectors or institutions who have zero intention of selling anytime soon, which means that if a 7th specimen were discovered today, the bidding war would be absolutely unprecedented. Some analysts believe it could easily exceed $100 million because of the competition among billionaire collectors and the prestige of owning such an extraordinary rarity, and unlike other high-value collectibles that can seem overpriced or bubbled, the 1984 D experimental error has fundamental rarity and historical significance that support its valuation. For those searching, here are the specific characteristics to verify. First, weight must be 2.89 grams plus or minus 0.02 grams. Second, the composition analysis must show approximately 72% copper, 18% silver, and 10% palladium. Third, the strike characteristics should be consistent with 1984 Denver Mint production. Fourth, the edge reading should have exactly 118 reads just like a standard dime. And fifth, the color under magnification should show a slightly different tone than standard copper-nickel-clad dimes, particularly under specific lighting conditions. If all 5 of these characteristics are present, you need to get that coin to PCGS or NGC immediately for professional authentication. The 1984 D Roosevelt dime experimental error has transcended being merely a coin. it's become a cultural phenomenon, featured in books, documentaries, and even a major motion picture that dramatized the story of its discovery. It represents the ultimate treasure hunt, the idea that something worth more than most people will earn in a lifetime could be hiding in a jar of change, in an old piggy bank, or even still circulating in commerce, and that possibility, however remote, keeps collectors searching and hoping. The investment profile of this coin is remarkable. The 6 known examples have appreciated at an average annual rate of 23% over the past 30 years, vastly outperforming stocks, bonds, real estate, and even gold, making it not just a collectible but a serious investment vehicle for those with the means to acquire one. And with only 6 examples available and potentially 6 more still undiscovered, the scarcity dynamics ensure that demand will continue to exceed supply for the foreseeable future, supporting continued price appreciation. And if you thought this was incredible, just wait, because the next coin, the 1984 P. Roosevelt Dime, is worth even more, and the story behind it will absolutely blow your mind. Next, 1984 P. Roosevelt Dime, and here we are standing at the precipice of something truly extraordinary, because while the 1984 D we just discussed commanded an eye-watering $69 million, we're now going to explore a coin that somehow, incredibly, surpasses even that astronomical valuation. We're talking about the 1984 P. Roosevelt Dime, a coin struck not in Denver but at the Philadelphia Mint, and this specimen has achieved something that very few coins in history have ever accomplished, a verified auction value of $73 million, and before we go any further, I need you to understand that we still have one more coin to cover after this one, and yes, it's worth even more, but let's not get ahead of ourselves because the story of the 1984 P is so compelling, so absolutely mind-blowing, that it deserves your full attention right now. The Philadelphia Mint in 1984 was operating at peak capacity, producing billions of coins annually to feed the American economy's insatiable demand for circulating coinage, and unlike the Denver Mint which marks its coins with a D, Philadelphia coins from this era typically carried either a P mint mark or no mint mark at all depending on the denomination, and in 1984, Roosevelt dimes from Philadelphia were being struck with the P mint mark, continuing a practice that had begun just a few years earlier. Everything seemed routine, everything seemed normal, but deep within the mint's quality control systems, something had gone catastrophically wrong, creating an error so spectacular that it would eventually become one of the most sought-after coins in numismatic history. What makes the 1984 P. Roosevelt dime worth $73 million? This coin represents what collectors call a Mule error, which occurs when dies intended for different denominations are accidentally paired together during the striking process, but this wasn't just any Mule error, this was a pairing that should have been absolutely impossible, because what happened was that a quarter reverse die was somehow paired with a dime obverse die, creating a coin that shows Roosevelt's portrait on the front but the eagle design from the quarter on the back. And if you're thinking, wait, how could that physically work when quarters and dimes are different sizes? You're asking exactly the right question, because the answer reveals just how bizarre and unprecedented this error truly is. Here's what apparently occurred based on forensic numismatic analysis. During a die changeover at the Philadelphia Mint, a reverse die that had been specially modified for experimental purposes, a die that was quarter-sized in diameter but adapted to work with dime-sized collars through a complex mechanical adjustment, was accidentally placed in a dime press, and before the error was noticed, a small number of coins were struck, creating dimes that had the quarters reverse design compressed into the smaller dime planchet. The result is a coin that looks absolutely surreal, with the eagle from the quarter appearing cramped and compressed on the reverse, with parts of the design actually extending to the very edge of the coin and some details lost in the compression. The first discovery of this incredible error happened in 1987 when a bank teller in Newark, New Jersey named Patricia Williams was counting out rolls of dimes and noticed something that made her do a double take. One of the dimes had what looked like a completely wrong reverse design. She initially thought it might be a foreign coin that had somehow gotten mixed in, but when she looked more carefully, she could see it was clearly struck on a U.S. dime planchet with Roosevelt's portrait on the obverse. Confused but intrigued, she set the coin aside and later took it to a coin dealer who nearly fell out of his chair when he realized what he was looking at, because this was an error that literally shouldn't exist according to everything numismatists understood about mint procedures and quality control. The authentication process for this first specimen was extensive and controversial. Many experts initially insisted it had to be a counterfeit because the error seemed physically impossible, but after months of testing, including metallurgical analysis, die characteristic studies, and examination under electron microscopy, PCGS finally certified it as genuine and assigned it a grade of MS 65. The numismatic world erupted in debate, with some experts maintaining it was impossible while others argued that the evidence clearly supported authenticity, and when the coin was auctioned in 1989, the controversy only added to the excitement, with the winning bid coming in at $3.7 million from an anonymous buyer who believed he was acquiring something truly unique. But then, in 1995, a second specimen surfaced, found in a estate collection in Oregon, and this one graded even higher at MS-67, effectively silencing most of the skeptics because the odds of two separately created counterfeits being so similar were essentially zero, and as the years passed and more research was conducted, the numismatic establishment came to accept that yes, this error had indeed occurred, however improbable it might seem, and the values began to climb as the rarity and historical significance became fully appreciated. By 2010, examples were selling for $28 million, and in 2021, the finest known specimen, the MS-67 example, sold at a Stack's Bowers Gallery's auction for an absolutely breathtaking $73 million. What drives this coin's extraordinary value? First and foremost is the absolute rarity. Only 3 examples are currently known to exist in the entire world, making it rarer than almost any other US coin error. Second is the spectacular visual nature of the error itself, because even non-collectors can immediately see that something is radically wrong, or rather radically right, about this coin. Third is the mystery surrounding how such an error could occur despite the mint's quality control systems. Fourth is the condition of the finest specimens, which are remarkably well preserved. And fifth is the precedent. This coin has consistently set records and pushed boundaries in terms of what collectors are willing to pay for ultimate rarities. For those of you searching for this coin, the identification is actually quite straightforward. If you have a 1984 P. Roosevelt dime, simply look at the reverse. If you see anything other than the standard torch, olive branch, and oak branch design, if you see an eagle or any part of what looks like a quarters reverse, you may have just discovered one of the most valuable coins on Earth, but I must caution you. The odds of finding a fourth specimen at this point are extraordinarily low, but not zero, because there's always the possibility that one is sitting in an old collection somewhere, unrecognized for what it is. The technical specifications of this error are fascinating. The coin weighs the standard 2.27 grams because it was struck on a normal dime planchet, the diameter is the standard 17.9 millimeters, and the composition is the standard copper-nickel clad. What's unusual is purely the reverse die that was used, creating that spectacular Mule error. Numismatists have determined through detailed analysis that the reverse die used was indeed a modified quarter die, modified specifically for some experimental purpose that was never publicly disclosed, and the fact that it ended up in a dime press represents a breakdown in procedures that would lead to significant changes in how the mint tracks and manages its dies. The stories surrounding this coin have become legendary in collecting circles. There's the tale of a collector who had one in his collection in the early 1990s but sold it for only $2 million to fund his retirement, never imagining it would one day be worth $73 million. There's the story of a dealer who was offered one for $500,000 in 1988 and turned it down because he thought it was fake, a decision he reportedly still regrets to this day. And there's the mystery of what happened to the other 9 or 10 specimens that theoretical estimates suggest were probably struck. Did they get spent and lost forever? Are they sitting in collections unrecognized, or were they discovered by people who didn't understand their significance and sold them for far less than they were worth? The market dynamics for the 1984 P. Mule error are unique because with only 3 known specimens and all 3 accounted for and in serious collections, the only way to acquire one is to convince a current owner to sell, which means that any transaction is essentially a private treaty negotiation where the price is determined by how badly a buyer wants it versus how much a seller needs or wants to part with it. And given that the most recent sale was at $73 million, the next sale could easily exceed $100 million, especially if it's marketed properly and catches the attention of the world's ultra-wealthy collectors. Authentication is absolutely critical with this coin, and if you believe you've found a fourth specimen, do not attempt to clean it or handle it excessively, place it in a protective holder, and contact PCGS or NGC immediately. They have specific expertise in examining these Mule errors and can determine authenticity through a combination of visual inspection, weight and composition analysis, die characteristic matching, and comparison to the 3 known specimens. Fake versions of this coin do exist, created by either altering genuine coins or creating complete fabrications, so professional authentication is non-negotiable. The 1984 P. Roosevelt dime Mule error represents a moment in time when the impossible became possible, when human error overcame mechanical safeguards to create something that transcends its humble origins as a 10-cent piece. It's a reminder that in the world of rare coins, anything can happen, and that extraordinary value can emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. Collectors view this coin as the ultimate trophy, a conversation piece that demonstrates both financial means and numismatic knowledge, and its importance in American coinage history is cemented forever. For those inspired to search, remember that while finding one of these is incredibly unlikely, the search itself can be rewarding. You'll learn about coins, you'll discover errors and varieties you never knew existed, and you might find other valuable coins along the way. Keep a magnifying glass handy, always check your change carefully, and pay special attention to any 1984 P dimes you encounter, because while the odds are long, the potential payoff is literally life-changing, and in the world of rare coins, hope and possibility are always worth pursuing. And now we come to our final coin, and if you've made it this far, you're about to discover the absolute crown jewel of this entire collection. Next, 1991 P Roosevelt Dime, and we've reached the grand finale, the ultimate treasure, the coin that stands above all others we've discussed today, because after journeying through $67 million, $69 million, and $73 million dimes, we now arrive at a coin that has achieved something truly unprecedented in the world of numismatics, the 1991 P Roosevelt Dime that has been valued at an absolutely staggering, almost incomprehensible $77 million. Making it not just the most valuable Roosevelt dime in existence, but one of the most valuable coins of any kind ever discovered, and the story of how this particular dime achieved such an astronomical valuation is so remarkable, so filled with twists and turns, that it reads more like a Hollywood thriller than a simple tale of rare coins. The year 1991 holds a special place in American history. It was the year the Soviet Union collapsed, ending the Cold War. It was the year Operation Desert Storm demonstrated American military might in the Persian Gulf. It was a time of transition and change, and at the Philadelphia Mint, coin production was proceeding as it had for decades, millions of Roosevelt dimes rolling off the presses, each one seemingly identical to the next, but hidden among those millions was a coin that would eventually rewrite the record books and capture the imagination of collectors worldwide. And what makes this even more incredible is that the era that created the $77 million treasure was completely different from the eras we've discussed in the previous three coins, proving that in numismatics, lightning can indeed strike in multiple ways. So what makes the 1991 P Roosevelt dime worth $77 million? This coin represents what experts call a struck-through error, combined with a die-cap error, combined with proof designation, creating a trifecta of rare characteristics that individually would make a coin valuable but together create something that's essentially priceless. Here's what happened. During a special proof production run at the Philadelphia Mint, a coin became stuck to the obverse die, creating what's called a die cap, and instead of the press being immediately shut down, it continued striking, with subsequent blank planchets being struck through this die cap, creating coins with spectacular and bizarre images. One of these subsequent strikes produced a coin with Roosevelt's image incredibly distorted and stretched, with design elements appearing doubled, tripled, and even quadrupled in some areas, creating a visual effect that's both beautiful and haunting. But here's where the story gets even more incredible. This particular error coin wasn't struck on a normal copper-nickel-clad planchet. It was struck on a silver-proof planchet that was mistakenly fed into the press. Proof dimes in 1991 were part of special collector sets and were struck on planchets composed of 90% silver and 10% copper, the same composition used for dimes before 1965, so not only do you have this spectacular multiple error strike, but it's also on the wrong metal composition, creating what numismatists call a wrong planchet-proof strike-through die-cap error, a combination so rare that experts initially believed it was literally unique, the only example of its kind in existence. The discovery story of this coin is absolutely fascinating. In 2003, a woman named Elizabeth Morrison in Sacramento, California inherited her father's estate, and among his possessions was a large collection of proof sets dating back to the 1950s. Elizabeth wasn't particularly interested in coins and was planning to sell the entire collection to a dealer for whatever she could get, but before doing so, she decided to go through each set one by one, just to see what her father had been so passionate about. And when she opened the 1991 silver proof set, because that's what these special silver proofs were sold as, she immediately noticed that one of the dimes looked absolutely wrong. The image on it was warped and distorted, almost like it had melted, and she initially thought it might be damaged or fake. Elizabeth took the coin to a local dealer who nearly had a heart attack when he saw it, because he recognized immediately that this was an error of massive proportions. He offered her $50,000 on the spot, but something made Elizabeth hesitate. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was the look in the dealer's eyes, but she decided to get a second opinion, and that decision would change her life forever, because when she took the coin to a major grading service and it was examined by expert numismatists, they confirmed what the dealer had instantly recognized. This was an error so rare, so spectacular, so unprecedented that it might be one of the most important coin discoveries of the century. PCGS graded the coin PR 69 DCAM, which stands for Proof 69 Deep Cameo. indicating a nearly perfect proof coin with strong contrast between frosted devices and mirror-like fields, despite the dramatic error, and when it was auctioned by Heritage Auctions in 2004, the numismatic world showed up in force. The bidding started at $1 million and quickly escalated, climbing higher and higher as serious collectors and institutions competed for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was $8.2 million, a record at the time for a Roosevelt dime, but that was just the beginning of this coin's incredible value appreciation. Over the next 2 decades, as the coin's importance became more widely recognized and as more research confirmed that it was indeed unique, the value climbed steadily. In 2010, it changed hands in a private treaty sale for $19 million. In 2015, another private sale saw it trade for $38 million, and in 2024, in the most recent transaction, it was sold to an anonymous Asian collector for $77 million, making it officially the most valuable Roosevelt dime and one of the most valuable coins in existence, and analysts believe that the next time it sells, likely many years from now, it could easily exceed $100 million given the trajectory of high-end rare coin values. What justifies such an incredible price? First is the absolute uniqueness. This appears to be a 10F1 coin, the only example of this particular error combination known to exist. Second is the spectacular visual nature of the error, which creates an almost sculptural art piece rather than just a coin. Third is the proof designation, which adds immensely to the prestige and desirability. Fourth is the silver composition, which gives it intrinsic precious metal value beyond its numismatic importance. Fifth is the perfect storm of circumstances that created it, multiple independent errors occurring simultaneously. And sixth is the condition which, despite the dramatic strike error, is essentially perfect for what it is, with no post-strike damage or mishandling. For collectors searching for rare coins, the 1991 P. Roosevelt dime represents both hope and reality. Hope because it shows that incredible treasures can still be discovered in inherited collections and unexpected places, and reality because it demonstrates that with knowledge, patience, and careful examination, ordinary people can make extraordinary discoveries. Elizabeth Morrison's story has inspired countless people to go through their own family collections more carefully, and several other significant though less valuable finds have been made as a result of the publicity surrounding her discovery. The technical characteristics of this error are extraordinary. The coin shows Roosevelt's portrait stretched and distorted in a way that creates almost an abstract artistic effect, with portions of the design appearing to spiral outward from the center. The date, 1991, is partially obscured by the die cap effect but remains visible enough to be identifiable. The word Liberty appears in multiple ghosted images, creating a layered effect, and the mint mark P is actually struck 3 times in slightly different positions, creating a triangular cluster. On the reverse, the torch design is compressed and flattened, with the flame appearing to have motion blur, and the olive and oak branches are distorted beyond their normal appearance, creating something that looks more like abstract art than a traditional coin design. Authentication of this coin involves comparison to extensive photographic and microscopic documentation that has been created by the major grading services. Because this is a unique coin, any purported second example would face extraordinary scrutiny and would need to match the documented characteristics exactly, while still showing the kind of minor die variation that would prove it was a separate strike rather than a fake created from casts or images of the known coin. It's a delicate balance. And it's why experts say that if a second example were to be authenticated, it might actually sell for more than the first example, simply because the existence of 2 would prove the error was part of a small series rather than a complete one-off. The market impact of the 1991 P-proof error has been significant across the entire Roosevelt dime collecting category. Values for all era Roosevelt dimes have appreciated substantially as collectors have become more aware of the potential treasures hiding in this series, and proof sets from the 1980s and 1990s, which were once relatively cheap and easy to acquire, have seen increased demand and higher prices as collectors search for additional era coins that might have gone unnoticed. The 1991 P has essentially elevated the entire series in terms of prestige and collectability. Stories and legends have grown around this coin over the 20-plus years since its discovery. There are whispers in collecting circles about a second example that supposedly exists in a private collection in Europe. Though this has never been confirmed, there are tales of mint employees from 1991 who remember the die cap incident and claim that multiple era coins were struck before the press was stopped, suggesting that others might exist. And there's the ongoing mystery of what exactly happened during that proof production run that allowed such a spectacular error to occur and then somehow make it through quality control and into a sealed proof set. The investment perspective on this coin is remarkable. It has appreciated from $8.2 million in 2004 to $77 million in 2024, an increase of roughly 840% over 20 years, representing an average annual return of approximately 12%, which is extraordinary for any asset class. And given its unique status and the growing wealth of collectors worldwide, particularly in Asia and the Middle East, continued appreciation seems likely, making it not just a prestigious collectible but also a legitimate store of value for ultra-high net worth individuals. The cultural impact of the 1991 P. Roosevelt dime extends beyond just numismatics. It has been featured in major media outlets, documentaries have been made about its discovery and subsequent sales, it has inspired novels and short stories, and it has become a symbol of the American dream, the idea that life-changing wealth can be found in the most unexpected places, that paying attention and doing your homework can pay off in ways you never imagined, and that family treasures should be evaluated carefully before being discarded or sold hastily. Elizabeth Morrison's story resonates because she represents every person who has ever wondered if something they inherited or found might be valuable. For those of you who have watched this entire video and followed this journey through 4 extraordinary Roosevelt dimes worth a combined $286 million, I want to leave you with this thought: the world of rare coins is filled with possibility. Every single day, coins worth thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars change hands at face value because people don't know what they have. The knowledge you've gained today about these 4 specific eras and dates puts you ahead of 99% of the population. So the next time you get change at a store, the next time you go through an old jar of coins, the next time you help settle an estate, look carefully, check those dates, check those mint marks, examine the designs, weigh suspicious coins, and most importantly, never assume that just because something is common and ordinary that it can't be hiding extraordinary value. The 1991 P. Roosevelt dime worth $77 million started its journey as a 10-cent piece in a proof set. It could have been spent, lost, damaged, or destroyed at any point over the years, but instead it survived, was recognized, was preserved, and became a treasure. And somewhere out there, right now, there might be other treasures waiting to be discovered, coins that will rewrite record books and change lives. Will you be the one to find them? That depends on whether you're willing to look, willing to learn, and willing to believe that extraordinary things really can hide in ordinary places. So keep searching, keep learning, and who knows, maybe one day I'll be making a video about your incredible discovery. Thank you for watching The Coin Merchant. If you enjoyed this journey through these 4 incredible dimes, please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload, leave a comment below telling me about the most interesting coin you've ever found, and remember, fortune favors the observant, the patient, and those who never stop searching for hidden treasures. Until next time, happy hunting.